Hey, my name is Thom Rainer. You are listening to today's episode of Rainer on Leadership. My co-host, I've been saying he's on vacation, but that's really a lie. He's on a business trip, and so I have the opportunity and the honor of speaking to Steve Arterburn. You're going to hear about him in just a minute, but before I even get into more stuff, including your introduction, Steve, thanks for being here. You just told me that you came off so many other podcasts and to jump on here. We're grateful for your time, and we're really grateful for your ministry and what you're doing. So thank you, my friend.
Thank you. Great to be with you. Glad we could work this out.
I am delighted to do so. Well, we also always want to thank our sponsor. Our sponsor is Tyndale, and we've been talking about a book by Derwin Gray called How to Heal the Racial Divide. We also have a podcast coming up with Derwin, interviewing him, and book is absolutely incredible. It talks about what's been done in his church and what he is doing nationally and internationally to heal the racial divide. Go to the link in the show notes and see his book, How to Heal Our Racial Divide, and also go to Tyndale.com. We're always grateful for Tyndale and their sponsorship of Rainer on Leadership. Like I said, we have an incredible opportunity. You see him if you're on YouTube. You're hearing him if you're one of the podcast apps, to talk to Steve Arterburn. And let me just give a brief introduction of him. Steve is the founder and CEO of New Life Ministries. It's the nation's largest faith-based broadcast, counseling, and treatment ministry. He's the host of a nationally syndicated show, New Life Live. It's a daily radio program heard on over 180 stations nationwide. He's the founder of Women of Faith conferences, attended by over 3 million women. So if you think that he doesn't have a little bit of experience doing these kind of things, you're wrong. He has a lot. He's a nationally known public speaker and author. He's written over 60 books. Sometimes I brag on my books. I can't even think about that. He's developer and editor of 10 specialty and study Bibles, including one of our favorites, the Life Recovery Bible, which has sold over 3 million copies. It's the second all-time best-selling study Bible at Tyndale. And he's also a teaching pastor. Yes, he does all of that. We haven't even begun to scratch the surface of all he does. He's at Northview Church in Carmel, Indiana, where he resides with his wife, Misty, and their family. Steve, that's a mouthful of an introduction. I was kind of amazed before we hit the record button. I was running a little bit slow because I didn't have a script. Amy had to send it to me with all the necessary information. And you said, "No rush. I got all the time in the world. Either you are humble or a liar. I cannot decide which one you are." And I'm going to conclude it's all humility. So there's no way you can not be in a rush with all the things you do.
Well, it's a good day because we got all this bad weather coming in and people kind of shut down their lives. But I want to tell you one of the coolest things ever that wouldn't be in my biography, but the best-selling Bible list just came out for 2021. And in the top 10 Bibles, best-selling Bibles, there are large print Bibles and just, Bibles for kids. But the best-selling study Bible for is the Every Man's Bible. It came in at number 4, and next to that was the Life Recovery Bible at number 6. And it's just fascinating that a Bible that Tyndale helped me and Dave Stoop create years ago, thought they'd sell about 100,000 copies, is all these years later still in the top 10 best-selling Bibles.
That is incredible.
Yeah, and that number doesn't include the fact that it's a Pew Bible for the Salvation Army, and the Prison Fellowship gives away about 100,000 of these Bibles a year. They went to their chaplains and said, "We've got all this money to give Bibles to prisoners. What Bible should we be giving?" And they said, it's the Life Recovery Bible. That's the one they want because, almost every prisoner in there has some kind of addiction problem that they need to be dealing with. So it's really so gratifying to see people use it.
Wow. Yeah, I also mentioned to you earlier, Steve, that I do wish that Sam were not traveling, but he's my son, and his mother, my wife, says I cannot be hard on him. So I will be nice. I will be nice to my son. But he's a pastor in Bradenton, Florida, And the opiate addiction that is there, what is just plaguing that community, he has firsthand knowledge about. He's in the fostering movement as a result of that and all that goes on there. So he
Mhm.
constantly has fostering children, and one of them was not able to be reunited with their family, so he adopted one of them, and now I have a grandson that came out of that movement from a mother with addictions as well. Give us a little bit of background. I want to hear the background. You don't hear as much about opioid. You don't hear as much about other addictions during these last 2 years because it's been COVID and all of the news media. But tell us, just give us some background. What's going on? How did you get involved? Tell us your story if you'll tie it all together for us.
Mm. Well, first of all, I could tell you how all of this started. When I was growing up, my parents went to this, they were Southern Baptists, and I went to a Southern Baptist seminary. They brought home an album from a woman named Gertrude Bahana, who
Hmm.
was Jewish and lived in the Waldorf Astoria, and she was an alcoholic, fell to her knees as a Jewish woman and said, "If you are real, God, help me." And had one of those life-changing light in the bedroom shows up, and she accepted Christ and then began to work on her alcohol problem. And I probably listened to that album over 100 times. I was so fascinated by somebody talking about this problem and seeing God show up. Then when I went to seminary, I was a guest columnist in the Fort Worth Star Telegram when I was going to Southwestern, and I kind of became a pet to the dean of the counseling school, and he let me go to these doctoral seminars, and they were studying self-help groups of all kinds and what that was all about. And so I was introduced to Alcoholics Anonymous and some of the other recovery groups while I was there at seminary, and I went to work in an alcohol and drug treatment center, and I could not believe how sick people got in the midst of their addiction and how well they became when they got off of whatever it was and entered into recovery. I'd never seen anything like it. I mean, it looked like they were going to die. And then 28 days later, things were back in place in a way you'd never believe. And the question, of course, was always, would they continue to do the things that had gotten them to that place? So I just felt a commitment to working with alcoholics and drug addicts and people with psychiatric problems. And I wanted the Bible to be a tool for recovery. I had heard that Dr. Bob, he was one of the founders of AA, he said he and Bill W. didn't just invent these 12 steps in recovery. He said, we got them out of the good book. And he said there were three places, specifically the Sermon on the Mount, the book of James, and then the love chapter, 1 Corinthians 13. And if you'll look at the 12 steps, you'll see the biblical foundation there. And so I presented this proposal to Tyndale, and then they had a big meeting. And when it was over, someone said, call Dave and tell him we're going to do the Bible. Because Dave Stoop had presented a proposal, and they didn't know. Half the room was talking about my proposal, and the other half talking about Dave, and we didn't know each of us had done it. And they said maybe they'd work together. And so Dave Stoop and I put this together. And the reason it's so powerful is that we found Bible scholars in seminaries and Bible colleges that were recovering. So they didn't just know stuff. They had either had a person in their family and they had gone to codependency groups, or they had found their way to some addiction themselves and had to get over it. And so when a prisoner is reading this, or anybody that uses that Bible, they go, man, this is talking my language. Well, it is talking their language because these brilliant minds also had been brought to their knees by addiction.
Well, you told the story of the proposal, and I can imagine it going to the powers that be at Tyndale and coming out with maybe not the clearest approval, but it all worked out. I got to hear more about this. I mean, did you just wake up one morning and say, you know what, I'm going to do a life recovery Bible? And or was it just like you said? It was just so much of what you had seen and how the Bible was the answer to 12 steps or whatever. I don't need to tell your story for you. You tell me. I'm fascinated about the Life Application Bible.
Well, there was a guy named Bill Hawley who came by one day when my office was in Laguna Beach, and he said, if you had anything that you could produce, that you would make a contribution to the world on, what would that be? And I said, Thomas Nelson did a little New Testament called the Serenity Bible, and it just kind of highlighted some scriptures and stuff. But to create a study Bible that would go along and help people in their recovery with these 12 steps, integrating the biblical truth with those 12-step principles, that would be the greatest thing ever. And it turns out to be the greatest thing ever. I have done Bible studies in maximum security prison cells where everybody's wearing the fluorescent orange suit rather than the maroon, because, if they escape, they want to be able to see them better at night. And these guys know more about the Bible than most people because they are reading this Bible and they are learning so much scripture. They ask questions that most people don't even think about asking, and they're on maximum security prison cells. That's just the greatest joy ever to have that. So I'll hold up a copy. It's a transformational tool. That's the thing. New Life, when we started New Life, we said, let's have three words: redemptive relationship, and let's have truth, of course, and transformation. And everything we've done has been not to make people feel better, but for transformation's sake. And sure enough, we're watching people transform. I don't know if you remember a journalist named Bill Moyer. He was quite
Oh yeah, yeah. He
yes.
was a Baptist that kind of shifted away for after a while.
Well, his son, his name was Cope, or his Cope Moyer, and his son now is on the board of directors of what's called the Hazelden Betty Ford Center, because this great recovery organization Hazelden merged with the Betty Ford Center, and he wrote this book, and I got a copy of it, and it's called Broken, was the name of the book. In that book, he said, I was in my 16th treatment. He was a cocaine addict. And this doctor came to me and said, is there anything that I could do for you? I would really like for this to be different for you, the last time you ever get help. And he said, the last treatment program I was in, there was a man who had a Life Recovery Bible. And I was wondering if you could find one of those for me. And in his book, he says, it was the Life Recovery Bible is the reason, it kind of gets me to talk about it. That was the reason that was his last treatment ever.
Wow.
And so he went on to not just recover, but now he's head of public relations and community and political stuff for that whole organization. And we just hear story after story of what a difference Life Recovery Bible has made. And you've got all these people's lives being changed, and then you've got other Christians over here saying things like, well, why do you need 12 steps? Why don't you just need one? Accept Jesus. And well, of course you need to accept Jesus, but nobody that accepts Jesus is instantly sanctified or discipled or mature. I've never known anybody that got delivered from something that was delivered into Christian character. Nor do I know of anybody that's been delivered from addiction and their family was instantly delivered from resentment and bitterness from all that they've been through. I mean, I do know of supernatural stories of deliverance, but rather than think that, oh, I'm done, you should take that gift of deliverance and be thankful you don't have to worry about all the temptation that everybody else is dealing with, and get on with sanctification and discipleship. And that's really what, the 12 steps are all about. Or somebody will say, hey, you guys talk about this thing called higher power. And I say, that's really an amazing concept. There are a lot of people that have accepted Jesus as their Savior, and they're going to be in heaven, but they've never really made Jesus their higher power. And I said, rather than, you know, abandon it, we ought to make it something that we look at as Christians. But the fact is, people that have an addiction problem have so much shame and feel so alienated. It's hard for them many times to relate to God as we know God. But oh, so many people, you know, they come to accept Christ once they get the stuff out of the way.
What an incredible story. We're talking to Steve Arterburn, the founder and CEO of New Life Ministries, and also he has a daily radio program, New Life Live, on 180 radio stations nationwide. And we've been talking about this Life Recovery Bible, sold over 3 million copies, of which he is an editor and creator. Just a side question, Steve. Many of our listeners are pastors or church leaders. That's the primary focus of our audience, not exclusively. I just want to know how you went from Laguna Beach to Carmel, Indiana.
Well, I lived in California for quite some time, and that's where I started New Life treatment centers, where we were providing Christian psychiatric care in hospitals. But I ended up here because I married someone from here, and I didn't care where I lived as long as I could be married to her. And it was a really good decision. And while I lived in California and loved it while I was there, this is an amazing place to raise a family. And it's just been a great blessing to be here in, quote unquote, the heartland.
You are in the heartland. Well, I want to shift just a little bit to this, back to this opioid crisis. And you are a pastor. You're leading other ministries, and you've done incredible amounts of writing, but your heart is a pastor. Talk about this crisis and what the church can do, or what the church should do. Just give us a little. Let's integrate the church with the opioid crisis right now, and whether it's biographical on what you have done, experiential, or whether it's just something that you can point our church leaders. Give us a little bit of advice there.
Well, the first thing I would say is, let me destroy the stereotype of the addict. About 5 years ago, there is this wonderful, amazing woman in ministry who has chronic pain. And when fentanyl came out, her physician said to her, hey, there's a medication that supposedly isn't habit forming, but is really powerful. And he prescribed fentanyl for her chronic pain. And it took hardly no time at all for her to become addicted to it. Now, this woman, I would put her faith up against anyone. My point is just physical addiction can overcome you could say innocently, no matter what level of faith you have. Her husband was the one that said, honey, you're not the same person. And then they began working with that physician to get her off of it. It took her a year to get off of it in a way that wouldn't cause her more problems. And so
Wow.
I just use that as an example that there are people in your congregation that I would call them the innocent addicts. You know, they took somebody's advice, they took a medication, maybe they had surgery, whatever. And it's so easy to get addicted to pain killers and opioids in that way. Then, of course, the other thing is, we've got this situation where I heard the other day that enough fentanyl has been smuggled across the border. If everybody took it, it'd kill everybody. There's that much of it. And there are stories of, it's so strong, and that search dogs will sniff it and die. It's so strong. And so it is not just the inner city or whatever, it's everywhere. And the pastor has such a great role in getting people help, not shaming them for addiction, but condoning the path out of addiction. And that path isn't the quick fix or the instant solution. Jeremiah 6:14, one of the most powerful verses, says, they provide superficial treatment for my people's mortal wounds. Now, pastors ought to look at that verse, because so often we want to do the quick fix, instant solution, and it's just not going to impact addiction. You need support. You need to get people off of it. You need them to have a path for recovery, which is a discipleship path, a sanctification path. You need to have a place that's safe for them, where they're not shamed. One of the problems in churches is that, recovery is for those people over there.
Yeah.
But everybody would benefit if we would do some of the things that need to be done in recovery. I did one of the steps after going to a fundamentalist seminar when I was younger, where I wrote a list of everybody I'd ever hurt. And then I called every one of those people and I made amends and restitution. And it was years later that I discovered, wow, that's right out of the 12 steps. That's amazing. It's a powerful thing when we work those steps. And it's so powerful when a pastor says, hey, you're just not going to instantly get over this. But if you would surrender and let people come alongside you and support you, that kind of humble willingness will lead you to the life that God wants for you. That's what we need from pastors.
One of the biggest problems with this podcast is its brevity.
Yeah.
And the amount of time that we allocate. And one of these days I'm going to start doing a long play podcast, but I could listen forever. I want you to have the last word, Steve. And maybe I haven't asked a question that you wish I had asked, or maybe you want to have one last thing to add. But the floor is yours, and just whatever you would like to say.
Well, I would just say that the enemy to peace, of course, is Satan. He wants nothing of peace. Jesus is the Prince of Peace, and he loves to get people addicted and sidetracked and everything disrupted in their life. And if that's what's happening, one of the greatest things you could ever do is to say, I have an extreme limitation. I somehow have fallen into this thing that it's not getting better. And then reach out and ask somebody to help you. I like to say that the two most difficult things for anybody to say, one is Worcestershire sauce, and the other is, would you help me? But
it's funny.
But the second can really lead to the life you want.
Well, I'm not going to try to quote you on it, because I think I butcher it every time I try. We're so grateful to Steve Arterburn, founder and CEO of New Life Ministries, editor, developer of an incredible Bible called the Life Recovery Bible. He has mentioned several things like the Life Recovery Bible. We've talked about his ministries. We got a lot of links in the show notes. I'm not going to go through them, but I'm just going to ask you to do so. Steve, I want to thank you again. Incredible ministry. I can't wait for Sam to listen to this, because he's right in the heart of it too. And God used the whole situation of addiction, and I wish there had been reconciliation, but God has provided us a grandson in all of this that is very, very well loved. So thank you for being here, my friend.
God bless you, and you keep up the great work that you're doing. It really does make a difference.
Well, thank you. You're very kind. We want to thank Southeastern Seminary, our sponsor. In Southeastern Seminary, we want to apply there from their countless number of degrees or programs. Go to sebts.edu. That's sebts.edu. When you apply, write church answers, one word, and they will waive the application fee. They're not just about theological education, folks. They're about preparing people for ministry and life. And I encourage you, we love our partnership with them through the Master of Arts in Church Revitalization. They have a lot of other programs and ministries as well. Once again, that is sebts.edu. Thank you again for being a part of Rainer on Leadership. If you're at YouTube, subscribe there. Whatever app you listen to us, give us a rating and review. We thank you. You're a faithful audience, and we reward you by interviews like we have just had with Steve Arterburn, and we thank you for being a part of it. Once again, thank you for being here. Anytime you can go visit us, do so at churchanswers.com, where we're helping churches get healthier together.